If you are having a very big Saturn transit, Saturn is a hammer and it will destroy what is not working for you. The stuff that is not going to last in the long run, it will be destroyed, shredded. What's up, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Destiny Janae, aka your favorite astrology weather woman, or astrologer as some people call us. And okay, we need to talk about the way that Saturn is infiltrating the music industry, and I am eating that shit up. Okay, when I say Saturn is infiltrating the music industry, it seems like we're seeing more creatives and artists talking about Saturn more than I've ever seen. And I think partially it is because Saturn is in the sign of Pisces and it's getting closer and closer to Neptune, and Neptune is all about creativity, creative, celebrities. So like, of course, Saturn is going to be a lot more noticeable in the world as it gets closer and closer to Neptune. Like, we're going to see more and more of Saturn in the creative works. And also because all of these artists are like, these are big name artists, and like people who didn't know what Saturn was previously are now, they're gonna know, and now people are gonna start paying attention. Okay, this is my Saturn return, what happened for me? I think we're gonna see astrology and Saturn kind of come into pop culture like we haven't seen it before, especially once Saturn and Neptune, they kiss, they meet up, they hook up, but that's not gonna be for a little bit. Let me not get too ahead of myself though. Let's just get back to basics. For example, if you're someone who's never heard of Saturn a day in your life, I mean, obviously most people know it's a planet, but like, what does Saturn have to do with astrology? So essentially, in order to explain to you what Saturn is and how it works, I also kind of have to explain to you how astrology works. So like, astrology is a mirror for our reality. So for example, if you want to put your hand up and wave in a mirror, the mirror is not going to wave back until you physically wave. And so astrology is kind of like that. Astrology doesn't necessarily make anything happen, it's just the mirror. It reflects what is happening. It's kind of like if you've ever seen a graph, like a line graph, where it just goes up. Because of the past data that you have in this graph, you can kind of guess what's going to come next. That's kind of like how astrology works. And so it kind of sets the scene of astrology as this whole like symbolic language. Like, it's not necessarily like controlling whatever. It's the language of life, if you ask me. Let me not get too philosophical with my Pisces moon. Essentially, Saturn in astrology is all about hard work. It's all about hard lessons. It's the planet of time, and Saturn is symbolically can be very cold. And honestly, the best way I like to explain Saturn is like a hammer. Saturn is make or break. If you are having a very big Saturn transit, Saturn is a hammer and it will destroy what is not working for you. The stuff that is not going to last in the long run, it will be destroyed, shredded, while Saturn is making that big aspect in your life. But Saturn is also a hammer, you know, like hammers don't just destroy, they build. Saturn wants you to have a very big and strong foundation in life, because you can't build a house on wet mud. Like, what are you gonna do with that? You've got to get it cement, like you've got to get the good foundation so that you can build on top of it. And Saturn is kind of like the backbone of astrology. And so Saturn is also one of the malefics, and the reason why we call it a malefic, meaning it can be really harsh and it's a bit meaner than some of the other influences in astrology, is because Saturn keeps it real. Honestly, as someone who has my sun sign literally is right on Saturn too, like, I'm very familiar with Saturn energy. I have a Pisces moon. Saturn is on my moon right now. I'm very, very, very familiar with Saturn's energy. The thing is too, is like, I think Saturn ultimately wants the best for you, but Saturn is tough love, honestly. It's like it's no getting around it. It's hard work that there's no getting around. It's rearranging your life in a way there's just no getting around that. And so Saturn is one of the malefics in astrology because it can be so mean. I do want to like add some nuance into the conversation too, because it's like, okay, there's physically what astrology is doing in your life, then there's how it feels, and those are two different things, because a lot of times Saturn is working in your best interest in your life, but it's like it can feel cold, it can feel rough, because Saturn might be taking away something that you loved, but it was really bad for you. So of course, taking that shit away, Saturn whooping your ass a little bit, it's not gonna feel good. And that's why I think a lot of people tend to have this fear when it comes to Saturn. But I genuinely do believe that the universe is always working in your favor in some way. I genuinely feel like there's a way to flip anything. Like, for example, Taylor Swift, her Saturn return, she has Saturn in Capricorn, and I believe Saturn in Capricorn was around the time that she released Lover. And it's also around the time that, you know, she had that situation where Scooter Braun, Scott Borchetta, those people, you know, they took her music from her. And it was like, dude, like, I believe she was about to release Lover, or she had like just released Lover or something. And that was around the time where she had announced, like, I'm re-recording all of my old music. And for her Saturn return is like, fuck, what the fuck, bro? Like, this is all of my hard work and you're taking it away from me. But fast forward, like, what are we, 4 years in the future now? Saturn can establish you. Saturn will make your paint dry. Saturn makes you permanent. And so it's interesting to see in the case of like Taylor Swift, where we look at her now, she's got her Eras tour. All of her Taylor's version re-recordings have kind of pulled in a whole new demographic of fan base. Not saying that she couldn't have, but you know, the story itself and like people really empathizing with Taylor, like, she's reaching a different level of stardom because of all of that. Like, because we got My Tears Ricochet, now we have the Eras tour. Now we have all of her Taylor's versions, all of her vault tracks. Think about how that horrible moment for Taylor during her Saturn return, how that was building her up for all of the success that she's having now. And obviously when we're looking at astrology, we can't just look at Saturn, you know? We can also look at like, how are the other planets changing? Like, where were the eclipses in their chart? Where were the Mercury retrograde? What is going on with your Venus, your Jupiter, your blessings? Where is Saturn in your own birth chart? How is it already affecting the other things in your chart? Like, there's so many things to take into consideration. But I've actually developed a way to make it really simple to figure out how is my birth chart coming up in real life. Like, say for example, you have a Saturn return coming up. Say you have Saturn in Aries. Saturn is going to be in Aries later on in like 2025, 2026. That's coming up for you. Okay, how do I know what's going on? And the thing is that astrology doesn't just happen one time. Astrology builds up. It's a series of patterns, and it's actually why I made my astrology observation journal, because, stick with me, it's not just like some random ad. Like, I literally use this all the time. There's astrology weather, and there's how it's impacting your birth chart, right? It's like, okay, are you gonna wear rain boots if it's raining, or are you gonna wear those cute flip-flops after you just got a pedicure, you know? It's kind of all about preparation. But the thing is, like, whenever you want to see what's going on in astrology, you can literally look, okay, what is going on when the moon is very close to Saturn, is aligned with Saturn? Let's say you have an Aries Saturn in your birth chart. So then I would ask you, pay attention every time the moon is in Aries. Pay attention every time Venus is in Aries. Pay attention when the sun is in Aries. These are all little clues, because you're gonna see Saturn being activated in your life. In my astrology observation journal, it's like this huge journal where you can just talk about your life, what was going on, how you were feeling, and all of that. But it presents all of the astrology weather. It's going to tell you every time the moon is in Aries, something is in Aries, something is impacting your birth chart. It's like over time, especially when I'm working with clients and I know they have an astrology observation journal or something, I always tell them, you go into your journal and see what happens every time the moon is in Aries. And I have had very helpful conversations with my clients over this. Even with myself, like whenever we have eclipses, if I'm wondering how this eclipse or how this Mercury retrograde is going to affect me, I just go back into my astrology observation journal. And this is the one from last year, so I literally have like a whole year's worth of like journals and my personal information, so I don't want to show y'all. Really, I can see every time something happens. It kind of helps me predict what's gonna happen next. So with that being said, my astrology observation journal is available on Amazon. You can find it on my website, destinyjanae.com. You can find the links to it. You can find the digital version, the physical version, which is on Amazon. The digital version is like a PDF download, so if you're like an iPad girly, that's definitely there for you. Yeah, I worked really hard on it. I'm really excited and I use it every day, and it's crazy what you can see happen. Yeah, with that being said, like, okay, what is a Saturn return? Now that we know what Saturn is, what is a Saturn return and like how is it working? Essentially, when you're born, the stars are in a certain position and your birth chart is essentially a screenshot of the sky at the very moment that you're born, and it's like a circular screenshot, right? After you're born, the stars continue moving, but the stars are interacting with this circular screenshot. So whenever Saturn comes back to the spot that it was when you were born, it's kind of it's that final push into adulthood. And some people have easier and better Saturn returns than others, depending on some more like advanced astrological reasons, but I'll kind of explain them to you the best that I can. Yeah, the Saturn return, it's telling you you need to grow up. It's gonna force you to get real. It's gonna force you to get rid of the shit that's just not working. The shit that is not serving your life, get it the fuck out of here. In Ariana's case, you know, it's this marriage that she was in, and you know, I'm sure there are a lot of other factors that like dealt with Ariana's Saturn return that we don't really know about. It's just that Ariana's divorce is the most public. I believe Kacey Musgraves also got a divorce during her Saturn return. Taylor Swift had her music stolen during her Saturn return. Kacey Musgraves says in her new song Deeper Well, which is like the title track of a whole new album that she's about to drop, she literally says, "My Saturn has returned. When I turned 27, everything started to change. Took a long time, but I learned there's two kinds of people. One is a giver and one's always trying to take all they can take." One thing too is that Kacey Musgraves has Saturn in her 8th house, and 8th house is like the house of divorce, and she kind of had a very public divorce. She also has her moon very close to Saturn, so this is like someone who's gonna have Saturnian themes throughout their entire lives. Like I have my sun very close to Saturn, and right now Saturn's on my moon, so like I'm very familiar with Saturnian energy. Saturnian energy is just like slow but steady. It's a bit more cautious than usual. They usually tend to be quite traditional, but Kacey's energy is all in Sagittarius, so like that's a different type of energy. Like I have my Saturn in Taurus, so like that's, my energy is a lot more earthy, but her Saturn is gonna be a lot more fiery than mine. Literally, SZA dropped her song called Saturn just recently, and what's interesting about all of these people who are making art about Saturn, like Kacey Musgraves has Saturn right on her moon. SZA is a Capricorn rising. Saturn is her chart ruler, meaning in SZA's life, of all of the planets in her chart, Saturn is the most influential on her. So of course, you know, whenever you have Saturnian Saturn ruled people, Saturn either on one of their personal planets or Capricorn or Aquarius, they tend to be, they went to Saturn school, and it's like when you've been working really hard on something, they tend to like reap their rewards, but they're lifelong, and they also tend to get the reward, the benefits of all of their hard work later on in life. Like for example, someone I can think of right now is like Austin Butler. He was Elvis, which obviously to like most people like in Gen Z, like most people around like they're in their teens, 20s, most of us knew Austin Butler from like Hannah Montana. We knew him from the Carrie Diaries. We knew him from, you know, all of these projects, but he's really getting his superstardom with Elvis. You know, that was a big role, probably his biggest yet. And actually whenever Elvis came out, Austin Butler was having his Saturn return. And what's interesting, I looked up his chart. He has Saturn right on his midheaven, which is the tip top of the chart. It's seen by everybody, and it deals with the career. And so whenever you have a Saturn return on the midheaven, it's kind of like, okay, this is someone who is getting the benefits of all of their hard work after their first Saturn return. Austin Butler, he was having his Saturn return. There was also a full moon that was right on Saturn. So like, not only are we going to see Saturn being activated during the Saturn return, but if we want to get really specific about, okay, when am I going to see this? It's like, okay, the sun is going to be on Saturn, or there's going to be a full moon very close to Saturn. And if you hear something right now, it's just my dog. He's snoring off camera right there. But yeah, I believe Elvis was released like around the time of this full moon in Aquarius. It was right on Saturn. I remember it personally because that was around the time that I graduated. I wasn't having a Saturn return, but I was having a Saturn square, which is kind of like a different part of the story. It's like the Saturn return is not the beginning and end of the story. Like I said, astrology takes a while to build up. You can say about every 7 years you're gonna have a hard Saturn aspect, meaning Saturn is gonna be in your life ready to throw hands with all the shit that's not serving you. So, you know, the first Saturn square you have is usually whenever you're about 7 years old. That's when you're kind of getting older. Your parents aren't really babying you quite as much. You know, some people have parents who go through divorces when they have their first Saturn square, things like that. And there's the Saturn opposition, which, oh my god, I remember mine very well. And this is usually around the time you're like 14, 15. And this is usually where you're kind of like rebelling against your family, rebelling against authority figures, because Saturn is for sure that authority figure energy, and the aspect of the opposition is kind of like push and pull energy, and it's like it can literally be opposition, like someone is in opposition to you, so it's kind of like you in opposition to your authority figures, and that's, you know, something pretty big. People go through it around 14, 15. So then we also have the Saturn square, which I just finished mine up. Oh my god. And there's this lyric by this guy named Kyle, and he has a song, and he said, listen, please approach your early 20s with some caution. GPS my way back to myself, I thought I lost it. That one, like, that lyric really hit hard for me, because I'm in my early 20s, and the early 20s are very much characterized by the Saturn square. So it's Saturn squaring Saturn in your chart. And so the energy of squares, it's like, it's conflict, it's like external conflict that causes a lot of internal change. And usually for most people, like usually when they're going through a Saturn square, they're usually around 21, 22, sometimes even 20. And this is a pretty intense time because you don't really have the same type of structure that you used to, and it's kind of like your life is very malleable during the Saturn square. So it's kind of like up to you to create your own type of stability, because Saturn is very big on stability. And so usually Saturn will give you these really hard lessons to make you get your shit together. And so then by the time we get to like 28, 29, 30-ish, that's when we're getting to that Saturn return territory. And that's where like all of the lessons that you've been learning throughout your entire life, there are all of these different stages, all of these different aspects that Saturn is making to Saturn in your chart. This is your chance to almost like prove yourself in a way. It's like time for Saturn to make you or break you. And usually Saturn is not going to break you down without a reason. It's not going to break you down without also giving you a way to build yourself back up. Of course, all of these artists are making songs about Saturn. All of these Saturn ruled artists, Ariana Capricorn rising, SZA Capricorn rising, Kacey Musgraves, Moon conjunct Saturn. SZA's kind of talking about how like she just feels like life is better on a different planet. Karma, she's talking about the energy of karma. Karma is a very big Saturn thing. If karma is really real, how am I still here? It just seems so unfair. Like the energy of Saturn is emotionally cold. It's isolating. It's like forcing you to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and get it yourself. And so this kind of leads me into like the main inspiration for this video, which is Ariana's recent album Eternal Sunshine, which I'm so proud of her. She has no idea like how much I love her, how much her music has done for me as someone with Sun conjunct Saturn, and like, you know, dealing with these harder lessons throughout my life. I've been seeing people online saying like, oh my god, it's better than Positions, it's better than Sweetener, it's better than all these other albums. But honestly, I feel like we should just let Eternal Sunshine shine on its own. I love Sweetener down. Like, Get Well Soon. That was like that song. I can listen to that song when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm going through something. Like, if nothing else is there when I'm going through an isolating Saturn period, Get Well Soon is there for me, babe. So what's interesting is that Ariana has spoken herself, you know, in her Zach Sang interview, in her Apple Music interview. She's talked about how like her Saturn return has been a big point of inspiration for Eternal Sunshine. So Ariana has Saturn in Pisces. It is at the very early degrees of Pisces, so meaning like around March 2023. That's when her Saturn was like right on Saturn. And so like even a bit before that, before Saturn officially got into the same sign, Saturn was still very close to Ariana's own Saturn when it was in the later degrees of Aquarius. And so that's when I think Ariana was probably feeling it, like the really late degrees of Aquarius. So I would say like late 2022, early 2023. Then once Saturn made that push into Pisces, that's where things get pretty intense. I don't really think I want to dive into like the whole like lore of, you know, the situations in Ariana's life. I really just want to focus more on like how these things were affecting her. You know, Saturn's return was kind of sending Ariana into a divorce. Ariana has Saturn in her Pisces 3rd house. Essentially the houses kind of represent different areas of life. So whenever I say house, I'm just saying area of life. And so Ariana, with her having Saturn in her Pisces third house. It can kind of represent your friends. It can represent speaking your truth, the way that you communicate. It can represent short-term travels, but most interestingly to me, it can represent contracts. And so essentially marriage is a contract. And with Ariana having her Saturn return in the third house, it's kind of like constriction, because that's what Saturn in transit does. It restricts things, it pulls things back. It kind of makes you get back to square one. I think that's kind of like what it was doing to Ariana's contracts, her marriage, her contract. And the thing is too, we can't really talk about Saturn without also talking about the other aspects that it's making. Like in Ariana's chart, she has Saturn opposite Mars. Those are both of the malefics. So like Saturn is naturally going to feel more intense for Ariana because she has Saturn opposite Mars and Lilith, you know? Mars can aggravate things. It's the other malefic that can kind of make things emotionally feel very flared up. Lilith is kind of like that repressed woman, and it's necessary rebellion because she was repressed. It's kind of like she's coming to take her power back. With that being said, that's between her third house, ninth house axis in her chart. That's your personal beliefs and like what you think life is supposed to be, and then kind of how you execute those beliefs with the third house and how you talk about them too. And what's interesting, a lyric that she says in Eternal Sunshine, I'm pretty sure she says it in We Can't Be Friends, Wait for Your Love. She says, me and my truth, we sit in silence. And like that was very like big to me, because I was like, whoa, Saturn is constricting her third house. She is not speaking on these things. She is holding this truth in because she kind of wants to see like, okay, who's there for me? Who's gonna be there for me when the media stops having a field day with this story? In her Saturn return interlude, the person who is talking is this woman named Diana Garland. So literally she says, when we're all born, Saturn is somewhere. The Saturn cycle takes around about 29 years. That's when we gotta wake up and smell the coffee, because if we've just been sort of relying on our cleverness or relying, you know, just kind of floating along, Saturn comes along and hits you over the head, hits you over the head, hits you over the head, and says, wake up. And it's time for you to get real about life and sort out who you really are. And honestly, I don't know that I could have explained that better, because like I said, Saturn is that hammer. Saturn is like the hammer of your divine purpose. It ruins things that aren't meant to last, and it builds up the things that are meant to last. And so I think that was kind of really intense. And also because Ariana is a Capricorn rising, she's gonna feel a Saturn return the most, because that's her chart ruler. Like Saturn is the driver in the car that is Ariana's life. And also Ariana was born at nighttime. So like depending on whether you're born at night or whether you're born in the daytime, Saturn can be easier or harder on you. And so when you're born at nighttime, it makes Saturn's placement in your chart a bit more frustrated. It makes it a bit meaner. It makes it a bit more bleak, a bit more blunt. And especially because Ariana has already all of these other aspects to her Saturn. But it's also like Ariana has her sun trine Saturn by sign. So at the end of the day, like there are positive aspects that Ariana has with Saturn in her chart. We also have to like talk about the ruler of a Saturn return too. In her chart, she has Saturn in Pisces. It's ruled by Jupiter in Libra, which is very close to her moon. So, and it's also in her 10th house of career. So that's also another reason why like her Saturn return was very public. It was very emotional for her. Jupiter in astrology can also kind of represent your spouse, so like that's, you know, even more of those things. And like I want to give you this information in a way where it's going to help you out. Everybody has a Saturn return, and for so long I think I was hiding from it, hiding from my success or from what comes with it, and it was really impacting my ability to be able to love what I do for a long time. Oh my god, I don't want to get to that, but and for so long, sorry, I just want to give you yeah, it's kind of like after you have your Saturn return, you're kind of a lot more self-assured. And this is where like I'm glad for her now. And you know how she was talking about it was impacting her ability to enjoy what she does. The ruler of her Saturn in her chart is Jupiter, very close to the moon, all in her 10th house of career. So like of course those Saturn themes are going to apply to that. Yeah, you know, just listening to the album, if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend going to listen to it. I do think this is kind of like Ariana's version of her like Reputation album. You know, she's going through all of these really intense things, but she's like falling in love at the same time. All these changes that she's got to make to herself and to her career. And honestly, I think it's a timeless story that a lot of people can relate to. I relate to her a lot, and I'm very proud of her for like going through this, because as someone with like Saturn on my moon right now, like I know how intense it can be. So like I may not be having my Saturn return, but I did go through my Saturn square, my Saturn opposition. Like we have all had these brushes with Saturn, and like long story short, the Saturn return isn't the end of it all. You know, there will be more Saturn aspects, but I hope that my information kind of helped you out and kind of helped you to kind of delineate, you know, like Saturn might feel a certain way, but what it's doing for you in your life is much more positive than your emotions and your emotional reactions to these things may be. So I really hope my video helped. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love y'all so much. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to get a reading with me, you can find that on my website, destinyjanae.com. I also have my 2024 astrology observation journal, which like if you want to get prepared for your own Saturn return, if you want to see how astrology is coming to life in your everyday life, I would definitely check it out. Available on my website, destinyjanae.com. I love it. I worked super hard on it, and I kind of do think this is actually a byproduct of Saturn being in my 8th house and Saturn being on my moon. So with that being said, I love y'all, and I'll see y'all next Friday. Bye!